and thank you for having me today. You should be able to see my screen with this wonderful image I created myself. No, of course it's AI, just to set the tone of the talk today. So we're talking about culture eats AI for breakfast. So for me, culture, let's start with some very obvious things. Culture starts at the top, but it doesn't end there. So I'm going to talk a lot about culture and values and some of the experiences I've had at different organizations, and how I have learned how that's important, and some of the things that we have tried at Lightful and other organizations to kind of help solidify culture and using values as a way to do that. So I see very much organizational values as a way to articulate culture, to write down what it's like, to how we do things round here being where we work. So I've had this interesting journey of working through a lot of different companies and seeing how their values and culture have evolved at times, and what has worked and what has worked kind of less well in that time. So as Christiana said, I worked for a long time at Just Giving, which is very popular now in the UK as a fundraising platform. When I joined 20 years ago this year, it was like 20 odd people. We were the scrappy startup. We didn't really have any values or culture written down or anything. We didn't have an HR team, kind of like the finance guy was the HR person. And it was an interesting journey as we grew from that 20 people. We sort of then the next level up was 60 people and then 100 people. And by the time I left, it was 150 people. And over that time, we had to do a lot more work to kind of become more intentional in how we thought about culture and how we talked about the values of the organization and what it meant to work there and how that changed over time. Because when you are like 15, 20 people in an office, you sort of get the sense of how things work just through osmosis, through like seeing how people do things. I mean, in like pre-pandemic when everyone was in the offices all the time days. But as we started to grow and you had more specialist teams, we had to work harder to say, actually codify, what is it about being here? So this image, this is Amory Hubi, who was one of the co-founders of Just Giving. She's an incredibly smart, intelligent, wonderful woman. And this was like the third or fourth iteration of like the values we got to at that time, which was called this manifesto by the people of Just Giving. And it's like, we, the people of Just Giving, hold the following principles to be true. And then you've got this kind of series of statements where, do the right thing, be curious, step up, join in, make things happen. KWYD rolls off the tongue, that one. And that meant know why you do what you do. And there are some perhaps flaws with these. And I think in 15 years ago, I think this was maybe 10 years ago, the fail fast, grow, obviously inspired a little bit by the Facebook kind of failing fast values back then. And I think what was interesting is that, like, reflecting on these, is that through those journeys, we got to, these were created internally, but they were a little bit top down as well. There wasn't enough, they weren't coming from the entire staff. Some of these, if you kind of read through them, do the right thing, think and do, like, how do they all make sense? How do they guide your behavior? And I think I've learned over time that it's difficult to then really encapsulate something in a neat, short, pithy way that really helps. So that's how, I've done working with Just Giving. We grew, and each of those kind of steps, we had to evolve our culture and values. When I first came across Lightful, kind of 7 years ago, I was impressed coming into this fairly small startup, and they had like their values on the wall, even from the get-go. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. It's obviously a values-driven organization. And so the values they had at that time were: we act with audacity, retaining humility, understand the importance of both listening, leadership, practicing generosity, while showing accountability. And these all rest on the foundation of respect and integrity. And so they're kind of an interesting set, because you'll read through them and go, okay, they make sense. They sound like kind of nice aspirational words. But the first three things were all kind of on a spectrum. So audacity to humility. Do I want to be really audacious, or do I want to be a bit humble? And then it's like, do I want to be listening to people to hear what they want to do and get consensus, or do I want to show more leadership and make a decision and get everyone to do that? So it was interesting as we started to go through this that these were not the easiest to follow values, because you can move where you were on those scales depending on kind of multiple factors. So it wasn't always entirely clear. And then it kind of also transpired that these weren't necessarily the values that the organization had come with, but they were the values of the organization that the CEO had previously worked at. So they were literally the values of another organization that we had adopted for our own. And so that obviously is not a kind of hugely beneficial way to place this. It's a good place to start, but it's certainly not a place to kind of end, because every organization is different and every culture is different, and it depends on the people working there, the output of your work, and how you're working together. So we had these values that didn't really work, and so we tried to then add some more specific, what we then call principles, to say help guide people's behavior. And so we added these like 5 extra principles. That was like smart working. We wanted to have transparency. We want to have application. We want to have responsibility, and we want to have standout quality. And it's like, okay, we'll work with the team to kind of come up with some of these more principles that are a bit more specific, that will guide our team in working. This didn't really help that much, because it kind of added a bit too much. And as you can see there, even like there's a description of every single principle. And so that didn't bring clarity of what the culture was, what our values meant. And so I think we made a great choice of making it worse by adding even more principles, where we had this very random thing called the Liam principles, which was based on like someone's uncle called Liam who ran a shop that was a really successful shop, and we're like, okay, how is this relevant to what we do as a learning organization? But they added this other layer of principles. And again, this was a bit more of a top-down approach, which again didn't necessarily work very well. And so we add these other principles of like, everyone needs to feel really important. We need to produce work we're proud of. We need to lift each other up. And it's like, yeah, I don't disagree with any of those things, but like, how do I apply them in my day-to-day life? And how are they forming part of our culture? So I think this kind of then journey culminated in us having like 8 values, effectively 5 principles and 3 pillars and 15 sub-principles, which is obviously a complete mess and makes absolute no sense to anyone at all. And realized we needed to kind of rip up the book and start again and go back to the team and go, okay, well, how what are our values? Like, how should we express the values? We all work here. We all know what it's like to work here. How do we go through that process? And so we asked, we did go kind of the bottom up approach and go, okay, let's start with a blank piece of paper and ask the team, what makes working here unique? What behaviors should we see more? How do we want anyone who comes into contact with us to remember our team? What makes you proud about the way the team behaves? And then what's the secret sauce that makes our team successful? And so doing a series of, workshops with the team to ask these questions, collate kind of themes and start to see like what generally people are saying, that enabled us to then whittle down quite a lot of information into something that was more understandable by the team, as very specific values, which then, and this is just over 2 years ago, we went through this exercise to come up with these new values, which are now: we care deeply, we're always learning, we communicate intentionally, and we build trust. So there's 4 values, much easier to understand than all the ones we had previously, the various different iterations. And so that's great. It's like, cool, we've got some values now, end of process. No, not end of process. That's just the start again. It's like, okay, we've expressed them. How do we live them? How do we embody them? How do we measure our work through this lens of these different values? And now I will have a slight kind of interlude before coming back to that around values and trying to come up with values in different contexts. So I, as well as working at Lightful, I am also, for the last 4 years, been coaching my son's football team. They're now at under 9 level. And I have learned an awful lot about culture and values from managing kids playing football. And in particular, I noticed a year or so ago, I was refereeing a tournament, and it was other teams in the club that I work with, and the kids were just not very nice and did not have great attitudes. And I thought, this is not how I want my team to be playing. It wasn't my team, it was other teams. And I was like, but how do I do that? How do I make sure that people coaching behave in the way that I want it to? Because I've been the coach, I'd kind of set the culture. I was the leader, and I'd started it to say, like, this is how we do things, and I was, managing them. But I realized I needed to do a little bit more of like solidifying what does that actually mean and communicating that to the kids. And obviously for kids, that needs to be really, really simple and easy to understand. And so I actually spoke to the head teacher of my son's primary school, who said that interestingly for them, like they'd found almost all the bad behavior they'd had in their school was related to when people were playing football. So it's like, what's wrong with football and causing kids to have arguments? And so I leaned on her advice of like, how did you manage that behavior, and kind of make a change and make it clear what was okay and what wasn't okay? And so she had done this listening exercise and asked the kids, what's happened? What are these negative behaviors we're seeing? And then what's the positive behaviors we're seeing? And how do we want to like shift from the negative to the positive? And so they kind of did this process, and they have their own school values, the Ebbs Way here. So these are like the way that they instill their culture. And it's kind of interesting for me. It's like, oh, I'd never really considered that schools would have a kind of distinct set of values or cultures. Me is very much a kind of business organizational side of things. And so I lent on that, and then I did the same, and I realized I had been trying to kind of impose a culture without necessarily asking from the grassroots up, literally in this case, like what were kind of what were the kids experiencing as culture. So I tried to that, and then realized, okay, I've made a mistake. I tried to say these are some values. Actually, I need to ask the kids, what are the values that you think? And so we did this similar exercise. What are the negative behaviors you see? How does it feel when you see those negative behaviors? What are the positive behaviors you feel you would like to see? How does it feel when people do that way? And then got to kind of brainstorm these we statements of like, how will that define how we want to be as a team? And this was quite considerably more challenging than doing the process in a work context, as when there's a bunch 10, 15, 8-year-olds with footballs, they just want to kick the football and not listen to you and answer your very weird questions about values. But I ended up managing to kind of extract out of them some things that they thought, some things that I thought. And then we came up with this list of now 6 values, which again, I think is probably too long, but it helped me really think that, when we're doing these exercises in organizations, we do need to listen to all the people who are in the organizations and not just impose our own culture, impose our own values on them, but think of this from the bottom up. So these are our new values. And now I use this as a framework to say, if someone's misbehaving or done, most of the time, stop kicking the ball, listen to me, remember our first value, it's about respect, listen to me when I'm talking to you. And it helps just have that, gives them a language to use, and it gives the parents a language to use with the kids as well. Anyway, so that's the kind of end of the soccer lead. I hope you've enjoyed the American soccer gifs for those who recognize them. Anyway, back to work. So how do we then, so we've got all these values, how do we embed these values in your culture and make them real, make them come to life, make them be more than just words on a piece of paper or a poster on the wall, and make them actually meaningful? So we've made a lot of effort in the last couple of years in terms of Lightfall, and the kind of main thing we've done is saying now our values are part of our OKRs. So we use the OKR framework to manage our company performance, and we have 3 high-level company OKRs. And the third one is about performing our best work and embodying our values. So we really, we list our values in relation to that OKR and say that's one of the key areas we need to work on as a company is how we are demonstrating and embodying our values. And so there's a kind of company level OKR, which then feeds into teams OKRs, where they're like, okay, how can we in the development team support these OKRs? And then that goes down into the individuals who are working towards their own performance goals of, how is their work linking to the team and the company OKRs as well. And this has been a really big, interesting step change in then making these values much more real and tangible for people. And so we then take it, from as I said, at an individual and team level, every person who at the company has a monthly review of their line manager. We ask a whole bunch of standard questions across the company. And one of those questions is about, have you delivered one, or how have you delivered one of the Lightful values this month? So it's something that we then build into all of those regular conversations. So it's not just kind of abstract, but people are actually talking about it every month with their line manager. And then obviously it's really important to celebrate those values as well. And so, nothing is really real until you've got a Slack channel about it. So we have a channel here where we're celebrating people's values, and we're helping shout out of like, I want to talk about this person who's done this great job because they've exhibited this value. So it makes the person who's getting a shout out feel good, and it demonstrates to the rest of the company what it means to actually exhibit those values, and hopefully encourages others to do the same. Now, you'll notice that I haven't actually mentioned AI so far in this presentation, but it's coming. And I said the reason I haven't yet is because one of our values being we're always learning. We came up with these new values kind of 2 years ago, and that was roughly the same time where we really started to take the kind of rise of generative AI seriously since the launch of ChatGPT. So I'm now ready to talk about AI. Hopefully you are also ready to talk about AI. And again, the way that we started this, we were having lots of conversations internally about, okay, how can we use this technology? What can it do? Is it useful to us? And so again, one of the key milestones is to create a Slack channel about it, which happened at almost the same time as us, again, coming up with those values. And so we started to formalize talk about this. There was a lot of chat kind of independently and lots of meetings like, oh, have you seen how this thing works? And this, but we wanted to sort of say, okay, let's create a space where everyone can share something about what's happening. I think I did a presentation for the company to say, hey, I've tried out these things. We're interested. If you're interested in this new area, share what you're learning as well. And so we kind of gave permission and said, look, we're always learning is one of our values. This is a new thing. It's really exciting and interesting and has potentially interesting, impactful use for us in the way that we can then help our customers better. Let's talk about it. So we had this kind of Slack channel. We started to talk about it and realized then we needed to do something a bit more formal and go, okay, how can we, there is something here. There's some excitement. There's some new possibilities. How can we harness that? And so what I did, we got together a group of us internally, a cross-functional team, to come together and go, okay, all of this AI technology is here. Are there some problems that our customers face that can be solved with this new AI technology? And that was kind of fairly the brief. And so we brought together this team, which we called our AI squad. And so we had designers, engineers, product, and importantly, like program teams, so kind of customer support, customer facing people. So it wasn't just kind of in a kind of black box, hey, let's build some cool tech without any application to kind of customers or anything. So we started this, almost a couple of years ago. And so we started thinking like, what is it? What are you excited about? What are you nervous about? How can we do this? What structure works well for you? How can we then explore this? And so we started actually meeting like every day for half an hour, just kind of playing around with the tech, showing our little experiments, showing our prototypes. And that enabled us to accelerate our learning very quickly. And soon we started to realize that we could build new tools and products with this technology that would be useful for our customers. And so by leaning into that, we were then able to like create a kind of narrative of, hey, we've created this team. It's very much in the boundaries of our value of we're always learning. We're starting to build these new products, and our customers are starting to use them and like them, and we're learning more off the back of that. So we were able to get some good press for that. I like this kind of quote here. They said, Lightful has been building features with AI tools with a fairly novel approach. So not a very novel approach or even a novel approach, but a fairly novel approach. But what was really helpful was having this kind of open kind of space where it was like, we will just try stuff. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. We've only, iterated on it for a day, and we'll try something else. And so that really helped us accelerate our learning. And so through that, we then realized, okay, we want to take this seriously. To take this seriously, we need to put a line in the sand and say, what does this mean for us as an organization? Because there was a lot of chat. So this is what, July 2023, a lot of people going, whoa, AI is great, but what is it? How do we use it? And so we then, I suppose, lent a little bit on our previous work with values of saying, okay, how can we come up with some principles that will guide our approach? But we don't want to spend months and months coming up with this because the technology is moving too fast, it's obsolete. We just need a little guide. And so we were able to then quickly say, okay, this is how we're going to work on AI, and we're going to think through the prisms of building responsibly, equity, and building trust. And that's kind of the same today. That's helped guide like what we do and what we don't do with AI. Now, fast forward a year or so, in terms of trying to, we were building these tools, and we'd kind of started to get some good customer stories, but we weren't looking so much internally about how we internally could actually become more efficient, effective using all of these AI tools that we're learning about in our AI squad. So we realized we needed to kind of refocus internally a little bit. And so we're a remote kind of first mainly company. We only really get the whole company together every once a quarter. And so we ran this back to school event last September, and we were trying to understand like, how can we use AI to kind of improve some efficiencies internally? But so we ran this a short survey to ask people, like, describe some challenges you're facing at work. Is there any unique way you've used AI to help your job you'd like to share? And it was important that the first bit was we were asking them to say, what are the challenges you're facing? We weren't saying, can you use AI to solve them? We wanted to start with the problems first, and then we'll go, okay, can we actually solve that problem with AI? Which was, again, the approach we took with the AI squad. We were like, we work with loads of charities. What are their problems? Can we solve those problems with AI? So we did this kind of outreach to the team to understand, okay, what are the challenges you face? Then we had everyone together for half a day, and we broke people into groups and said, here are some of the challenges people have said. Can we solve any of those challenges using AI? And using GPT specifically. So we were using these versions of ChatGPT where you can kind of create your own version of ChatGPT with custom instructions. You can upload your own documents or and give it very specific ways of answering questions to solve a very specific endpoint question. And we had the whole team working across this. We had 3 or 4 groups. There was a member of AI squad in each of those groups who had a bit more kind of expertise and was guiding everyone. And in a way, the goal was not necessarily to build anything that was to be useful. It was more to get the wider team understanding how this technology worked and was applicable. As it happens, actually, one of those tools we built, which you probably can't see there, just like easily summarize and respond to our most common customer queries. Like, we've built a little GPT that will help us do that, because it was, we got most of the way there on the innovation back to school day, and then it was easy to kind of finesse that afterwards, which in my experience, like from doing many hackathons over the years, almost never anything you build in a hackathon is almost never useful afterwards. But it was a great year learning exercise, and then we got to build some useful things afterwards. And I think it was this approach of, sharing the problem, starting with the problems, then sharing ideas, like trying to learn, and kind of in exhibiting, again, for us, trying to exhibit our values through this process of listening, building trust, etc. And so now we're trying to then embed AI much more into our culture. So this is, related to that OKR I mentioned around we're always learning, which is one of those values. We have these 2 goals of 90% of staff have completed a learning goal, but 90% of the team have shared a new AI skill with the rest of the team. So we were trying to like build a way of people sharing those skills. Definitely don't think we're hitting that yet. And it's an area where we need to improve. So, for example, one of the things we were doing was like, oh, we'll create a spreadsheet for each team and they can write down the ways they're using AI and they can, that can be a way of disseminating information. So here's one example I had around brainstorming ideas, webinar titles, for example. Um, and but that's not necessarily the best way to share it. It's a process for us. And yeah, to say on that example, brainstorming webinar names, actually, I can't blame AI for this particular title of this talk. It was one that I came up with off the back of some rubbish ChatGPT suggestions. Anyway, we realize that it's something we need to get better at. It's like sharing these AI skills. So this is a slide from one of our recent company meetings a couple of weeks ago that I'm sharing. And so again, we're still trying to think like, how can we share those AI skills? Like more than just posting something on a Slack channel or putting them in a list somewhere. Like, how do we do that? I think it's a challenge that we haven't really solved yet, because there's these pockets of like deep expertise in the organization, but we haven't spread it more widely yet. And so that really takes me to the end of the kind of key things I wanted to say around culture. And I guess there was quite a lot at the start around culture and values and how those two things, how to create them, how to embed them. And I think for us, that journey has then been, okay, building AI, we want to make it kind of part of the culture. And I think as I'm talking, kind of was reflecting on this talk, it's like we almost need to go back to the basics of speaking. It needs to be a grassroots approach again, like you would do with your values of like, what does it mean for you? How are actually you finding this useful? And if one person is finding AI useful in one area, and how do we let them know, tell someone else in the organization that that's a really useful use of AI as well. So I think that is a journey that we're very much far from at the end of. But I would definitely really like to hear any of your thoughts of the ways that you're trying to do that in the organizations you're working with. But I will stop sharing there, and then we can. Well, my mouse is turned off. Have some questions if you have any.